Far-right violence is on the rise in America. The Washington Post reported that violence by white supremacists and other far-right attackers has been on the rise since Obama's presidency, but has surged since Trump took office. The Post's analysis also found that over the past 10 years, violent attackers with right-wing political ideologies have committed dozens of shootings, bombings, and other violent attacks, more than any other category of domestic extremist. For the far right, violence is a feature, not a bug, because terror and the threat of terror is part of their political strategy. The far right in the US are determined to preserve white supremacy no matter what the cost. They'll abandon democracy before they'll give people of color and women a seat at the table. In that vein, the far right have also put considerable effort into dehumanizing anyone who doesn't support their worldview, essentially suggesting that their victims aren't worthy of humanity. We see this online with Facebook pages and groups that promote violence against immigrants and race baiting, YouTube influencers purposefully radicalizing their viewers from mainstream conservative content to white supremacist content, and the recent viral non-playable-character meme, a common video game trope which states outright that those who oppose the right aren't human beings but non-playable characters who deserve abuse. Not to mention the near-daily dehumanization of his political opponents found on President Trump's own Twitter account. At the same time, media organizations covering the far right often amplify their hateful rhetoric and soften their image in their own coverage. NBC News recently gave the white nationalist group Identity Europa a free 5-minute infomercial packaged as an interview on The Today Show. The Washington Post ran an article of quotes from far-right figures, not from interviews, but simply copied and pasted from their own platforms. The New York Times ran a profile of Proud Boys founder Gavin McInnes, referring to him as a Brooklyn hipster. The racist, dehumanizing language and calls for violence from these far-right figures received hardly any attention at all in these pieces. Next year, expect far-right violence to become more common, more strategic, and more organized. Vice News recently reported on The Base, a social network dedicated to moving online fascists up the ladder of engagement from online shitposting to participating in paramilitary trainings for a so-called forthcoming race war. After years of recruiting foot soldiers and priming them for violence, the far right is now developing the infrastructure needed to mobilize and deploy them. The good news is that the days of the far right's activities being largely ignored by the federal government are probably over. Next year, the House of Representatives will have a Democratic majority, and Democratic committee chairs have promised to hold the Trump administration and their far-right allies accountable. Incoming House Judiciary Committee Chair Jerry Nadler is off to a running start. He sent a letter to Trump administration Justice Department officials demanding answers on the administration's handling of matters related to domestic terrorism, countering violent extremism, domestic surveillance, and the unfair profiling of racial, religious, and ethnic minority groups, while also stating his intention that the committee will certainly be investigating them all next year. Congressional oversight is a good start, but far-right extremism is a systemic problem that requires all hands on deck to fix. Tech companies have to be pressured to stop allowing extremist and radical content to thrive on their platforms and actually protect the civil and human rights of users who are victimized. Media outlets need to stop being duped into amplifying hateful rhetoric, and in lieu of moral leadership from our president, Americans need to send a message to all of the above institutions. Violence from the far right and those who enable it will no longer be tolerated.